Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into today's video. We're going to have a look at whether next week's 10 days in today's video. This will take us into the second half of April. Going to be staying unsettled, that's the basic message, and low pressure is always going to be churning around the country, bringing showers or longer spells of rain going into the second half of April. So there's no sign of an extended spell of drier and warmer spring-like conditions at this stage. We'll have a look at the charts in a second. Before I get on with that, just to mention the ads that go through this, there's links to articles on all of the pages. Have a browse through widgets and click through the links if there's any articles that you're interested in. And thanks very much for doing that. There's video ads on most of the pages which open up in the content. When you watch them, they'll close back up again. It all helps to pay thegarethservice.com, and it means we don't have to worry about subscriptions or pay-per-view, anything like that. We can stay completely free at the point of delivering the updates to you. So thanks very much for doing that. Right, we'll start off with 500 millibar height anomaly charts. We've got the E70F here on the top, and the GFS, which we'll have a look at in a moment, is on the bottom. 500 millibars, 80,000 feet is an area in the atmosphere where high pressure, low pressure are being moved around by the jet stream running above. Blue extrapolates to low pressure, and yellow, orange and red on these charts always extrapolates to high pressure. So they both see a continuation really of blocking around Greenland and extending down into the Atlantic, and then they've both got this trough of low pressure in the Atlantic, and that runs through the UK like that. So the jet stream with this is doing something rather like that. It's a very elongated jet stream, quite an unusual jet stream for this time of year, but the upshot is that we're basically bringing the jet and the flow through the UK with these troughs of low pressure, and the jet stream is generally on a bit of a southerly track as well. So not only is it very unsettled, it means that the worst of the unsettled conditions, like to be across England and Wales, and pretty cool temperatures as well, with, as I say, the jet stream generally on a bit of a southerly track there. GFS is very similar. It's a little bit different in that it doesn't have as much ridging around Greenland. There are still hints of high pressure there, and perhaps not as much extending through the Atlantic, but it's the same broad idea, which is have the low pressure but trough centred to the south and through the UK. So again, it means that the jet stream is doing something like that. Places us within this trough and on the cool side of the jet, more or less. So pretty cool and pretty unsettled going into the second half of the month. This takes us to the 17th of April. Having a look at the GFS temperature and precipitation ensemble. So dealing with temperatures first of all, the red line here is a 30-year temperature average. Going to be pretty cool for the rest of this week and into the weekend. Then the idea through next week actually is to lift the temperatures, at least the upper air temperatures, up a little bit. I think on the surface it's probably not going to realise this lift in the temperature, because on the surface we're going to have a lot of rain coming through, which means it will start to pull the temperatures down a little bit. Maybe the nights will be fairly mild, but I think days will probably be fairly cool, even with these warmer upper air temperatures going into next week. The main thing though is the precipitation. Look at this, loads of rainfall spikes coming up there. Starting right now really, and just going on through the chart. We just keep lots and lots of precipitation spikes, particularly unsettled next week with these big rainfall spikes coming through. So expect quite a lot of rain in the next week to 10 days. That's the message. And temperatures aren't going to be anything to write home about. This is the temperature anomaly for the coming week. That's looking a bit colder than average, generally a bit cooler than average from the 7th to the 15th of April. The precipitation anomaly, that's generally coming out wetter than average. So cooler than average temperatures, wetter than average rainfall. It's not going to be a tremendously inspiring week. This is the 10-day accumulated precipitation forecast from the weatheroutlook.com in high definition. Do check out these high def charts at the Weather Outlook. And you can see that for the next 10 days, the wettest conditions really suggested to be across England and Wales, where anything between 50 and 80 millimetres of rain is being predicted. That's 2 to 3 inches of rain really over the next 10 days across much of England and Wales, particularly focused across Wales, you'll see. Not as bad or not as wet for Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England, but a bit of a deluge potentially across parts of England and Wales. Here's the generic charts then, and we start off on Monday with the GFS. We've got this ridge of high pressure blocking out conditions to the north, with the trough down to the south. The jet stream here is going like that. So it's very much in line with what we're seeing from the height anomaly chart, really. This low pressure will be throwing up bands of rain. It's not going to be tremendously cold. I've been explaining this in recent updates. Despite all of this blocking that we've got going on up here, we're not really bringing down very cold air from the north and northeast. The flow generally is remaining sort of Atlantic base. The air is remaining generally Atlantic base, but it will be quite cool just because of the position of the ridge and the trough and the bands of rain that's being thrown up. The temperatures aren't going to be exciting. We go into Tuesday. Broad setup continues, blocking across Greenland, low pressure to the south, throwing up bands of rain across the country. We just keep it unsettled through next week. Low pressure is around the country throughout next week, bringing bouts of rain across the country. This takes us up to Friday the 15th of April. You see the broad setup is still continuing here with the high pressure around Greenland. The low pressure is through the UK and extending down to the Atlantic. The jet stream doing something like that. We are close to bringing down very cold air from the north, but it's just sort of being diverted in that sort of direction into the Atlantic. And then, of course, that eventually gets thrown up into the UK, but very moderated because it's a long Atlantic trek. But we're not really opening the floodgates to northerly winds as we could have done if things would have lined up slightly differently here with the blocking and the trough. We could have really opened the door to very cold northerly flow, or at least very cold for April. We go through into day 10. This takes us up to Sunday the 17th of April. Still looking very unsettled. Just a suggestion that we're bringing up some slightly warmer air from the south here, but overall the broad pattern remains the same, which is really unsettled conditions with further bands of rain coming across the country. That's GFS. ECMP Earth is very similar, so start next week, same idea, high pressure to the north, low pressure to the south, rain bands coming up across the country, and we keep these blocked but very unsettled conditions going through into the middle part of next week. We go through to the end of next week, and no change. Look at that, we're still bringing these areas of low pressure through the country. In fact, here on Friday the 15th, there could be some sort of weather front waving through the flow like that, with the ridge again up to the north of the country. And then we go through to day 10, which takes up to Friday the 17th of April. This was a little bit different, just tried to build a ridge down across the country, so perhaps settling down a little bit there. That does look quite transient. Then finally, having a look at the GEM, it's all very, very similar. Rain bands being thrown up with the blocking across Greenland, the low pressure underneath it running through the UK. This continues throughout next week. It'll be a really unsettled week next week. And we end up on day 10, which is Sunday the 17th. Very much as the GFS is showing, with low pressure right over top of the country. Still very unsettled. So we are looking at a really unsettled April. If this comes off, as I think it probably will do, certainly the first half of April will have significantly wetter than average conditions. It looks like it's going on a bit into the second half of the month as well. Temperatures aren't that inspiring either. So all in all, very, very disappointing. No sign of an extended spell of drier and warmer spring-like conditions at this stage. We'll see what JMA Friday's got to say with the month ahead look ahead tomorrow to see if there's any sign of something a bit drier and warmer. But for next week to 10 days, really unsettled and temperatures disappointing as well. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.